Hey y'all. Alright. So, Gary Antuanne Russell, 15-0 and 15 knockouts. Goes against Rances Barthemely, 29 wins, 15 KOs, 2 and 1 loss. Look, so this fight is going to be happening on the Danny Garcia versus Jose Benavidez undercard. Gary Antuanne Russell is like probably my favorite brother in this, is my favorite brother. He has a very like quick style and stuff. He's very aggressive. He brings the fight to you. He's no slickster. He's no and he's very fast too. Especially for this division. He ain't as fast as his brothers, but as fast as Gary Russell Jr. But he is quick himself, especially for this division. Now, in my opinion, for this fight, I think this fight is going to go either two ways. Gary Antuanne knocks him out, knocks Rances Barthemely out, or Gary Antuanne beats Rances Barthemely by a wide unanimous decision because, first of all, Gary Antuanne Russell has pressure. He's a good pressure. He's good at initiating pressure, and he's good at snatching rounds from his opponents because of his activity. We saw that displayed very well against Viktor Postol. Viktor Postol, for most of that fight, was not winning. He was getting outworked and getting outboxed. He wasn't getting like a conventional outbox, but he was definitely getting outworked. It was more of the outworking of a Viktor Postol who was starting to age and was having a layoff. Viktor Postol was known for his victories over not victories, but good fights against Terrence Crawford, Josh Taylor, and Jose Ramirez, who all he gave good fights except for Terrence Crawford. The Terrence Crawford fight was not very competitive. That wasn't Terrence Crawford was completely outboxing him and dropped him like 2 times, I'm pretty sure. But aside from that, he is the first man to stop Viktor Postol. Gary Antuanne Russell, he's the first one to stop Viktor Postol in the 10th round. People debatably would say it was an early stoppage when others will say it was valid, but personally, I think it was a pretty early stoppage. I don't think Viktor Postol was that hurt yet. And his coming out party for Gary Antuanne Russell was against Giovanni Santiago, who had a decision loss over Adrian Broner. Now, he was put on the mat because he had a competitive fight with Broner after Broner had a layoff and debatably won. I thought Giovanni Santiago bagged the fight with him. I thought he had a victory over him, but the judges thought otherwise. And Gary Antuanne Russell went on to dominate Giovanni Santiago. Dominate him. He destroyed him and made him retire on his stool. That's how devastating of a fighter Gary Antuanne Russell was. And Gary Antuanne Russell is a fighter who is being moved up very well after not fighting that good of opposition a couple of years earlier, and now he's being moved up to the ranks at the age of 26. And as for Rances Barthemely, he is being fed to the wolves because, look, he's 37 years old. He's getting older. He still wants to be a 3-division champion, but I just don't see how he's going to do any better in this fight. Like, I don't think he's going to do that well. I just don't. I don't think he has a chance in this fight at all. He had a draw with Robert Easter Jr. back in 2019. He had a decision against Ali Rivera, not to be confused with Rivera, like Ali Rivera, that other guy who looks like Muhammad Ali but he's Dominican. Yeah, he had a UD loss to Kyra Kilf. I don't know how to pronounce his name. And then he had a unanimous decision over Kyra Kilf. Then he had a decision over Mickey Bay by a split decision too. And looking at these fights, all right, so Kyra himself. Kyra is a fighter who has 3 losses, right? Kyra lost a unanimous decision to Ricky Burns. A UD to Ricky Burns. Lost to Regis Prograis. Had a solid decision over Edouard Troyanovsky. Okay, so Troyanovsky basically was a fighter who was seen as like a top fighter at the 140-pound division during a smaller period of time, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he was seen as one, and he held the IBF title. He was essentially seen as like a very dangerous fighter, and Julius Ndongo going into that fight, the guy who beat him, was seen as a drastic underdog, and Julius Ndongo knocked him out. But despite his hype as a fighter, against Cairo, it kind of showed where his level was truly at, because it wasn't of a level of what people thought it was. This is why people underrate Terrence Crawford's victory, that's why people underrate Terrence Crawford's undisputed at 140 like claim, even though he was undisputed, I understand, but how strong was that division at the time? Was it really that strong? Really? And the Robert Easter Jr. fight. Robert Easter Jr. is a fighter who had good titles. You know, he had the IBF belt, he had the IBF super light title. So yeah, he was being moved up in a very in an appropriate fashion. Recently, I'm pretty sure he suffered an injury. I think he got shot, which is unfortunate. He didn't get shot dead, but what had happened was he got shot and, you know, he was sent to the hospital. I forgot where he got shot. I'm pretty sure that's what happened though. He's had a lot of split decisions and a lot of unanimous decisions. But notably, his split decisions were against a step up in competition. Like back in 2016, he fought Richard Comey, who recently had gotten dominated by Vasyl Lomachenko, and Javier Fortuna. He had a split decision against Javier Fortuna, a split decision victory. And Fortuna was overweight in this fight, and he lost a single point for holding and hitting. This fight could have been a draw. Then he loses a unanimous decision to Mikey Garcia in a unification bout, and his face looked like a mess, man. Jeez. And looking at the opposition in terms of how well the opposition was dominated. Now, I'm aware Gary Antuanne Russell fought an out of shape than typical Victor Postol. Okay, that's reasonable. Victor Postol, in my opinion, would beat all of these guys. That's my personal assumption. I think that Robert Easter Jr., Mickey Bay, Javier Fortuna would not beat any of these types of fighters. He wouldn't beat a Jose Ramirez. They wouldn't touch these fighters, in my opinion. They wouldn't. And as for Victor Postol, he had a victory over Lucas Matisse. It was close. It was close in the scorecards, but, you know, he still got the victory. Lost a drastic decision to Terrence Crawford. Lost a decision to Josh Taylor, and lost a majority decision to Jose Ramirez. So I did say that they had close and competitive fights. I would want to see Gary Antuanne versus Jose Carlos Ramirez. I think Carlos Ramirez is the most vulnerable out of the other fighters in that division. Even more vulnerable than Zepeda, the person who he beat. But at this point, that's how I believe. Because recently, against Jose Pedraza, he had a unanimous decision, but the fight could have gone either way, 116, 112 wise. That fight was a competitive, close fight. It was closer than many people expected, but the same for the Josh Taylor fight. I expected Josh Taylor to win by a good decision, but the scorecards came out and it was a lot closer, even though it clearly wasn't. That fight was like 116, 112 itself, or 116, 110, because of how close it was, because of how many times Josh Taylor dropped him. And in my opinion, I feel as though this fight would just go like this, right? I think Gary Russell is a younger fighter. He has a quicker speed, the athleticism, and he brings something different to the table in terms of a set of attributes and athleticism that Robert Easter Jr. and some of the other fighters that Rances Barthemely has never seen. You're putting Rances Barthemely, who's 37, against a fighter who is aggressive, who comes in and breaks you down, against someone in Rances Barthemely who keeps distance and likes to keep his patience. The patience was so strong that he had a draw with Robert Easter, which was considered one of the most boring fights of all time, with barely any punches thrown. But even still, I expect Rances Barthemely to try to utilize distance, but he's not going to do very well. I don't think he's young enough or he's good enough to use distance, right, to utilize it effectively. I think he's just going to get ran over. Not like a drastic, like first round KO, but I just think he would get ran over on the scorecards if they both fall, or once they do fight. I would say that this is an easy bet. I don't see too much about this fight. I think this fight is pretty much what it says. You know, prospect beats up another another fighter moving up in the ranks. I understand Rances Barthemely has a story to tell, and he's a Cuban fighter, and he's a person who is trying to become another weight division champion, but I just don't see that happening. So, in my opinion, Gary Russell by either decision or stoppage. Also, make sure to like, guys. What are your guys' opinions about this fight? Let me know in the comments section. All right. Please like and subscribe. Thank you for tuning in. And hit the notification bell. Don't forget that. All right.